the stiffness can come and go. And that's the bit that can get very confusing for people of like, you were limping an hour ago and now you're not. And it's something that I really struggle to get my head around mentally because I think, am I making this up?
Welcome to the Redefining Midlife podcast. I'm Jo Clark and I'm so glad you're here. And this is a podcast for women who are ready to break free from outdated stereotypes, rediscover themselves, and embrace the endless opportunities that midlife brings. Each week, I'll share expert advice, actionable strategies, and inspiring conversations with incredible women who are redefining what it means to thrive in midlife and beyond. From health and wellness to reigniting your purpose and passions, this is your go-to podcast for feeling empowered, supported, and seen. And midlife isn't the end. It's your time to shine, rewrite your story, and create a life that you truly love. So let's get started. Wherever you are in the world, thank you for tuning in today. It's so lovely to have your company. Now, I had some incredible feedback from last week's conversation with Lisa Cox. Many of you were deeply moved by her powerful story, her resilience, her courage, and how she turned unimaginable adversity into a meaningful mission. And Lisa reminded us that disability doesn't define worth or potential. And as she shared, around 20% of the population live with a disability. And chances are almost all of us will experience some form of disability at some point in our lives. And with that in mind, today's episode continues this important conversation by shining a light on another remarkable woman's lived experience. Kelly Buchan is a creative Aussie mum in her late 40s, navigating life with rheumatoid arthritis, a chronic autoimmune condition that has profoundly reshaped her day-to-day life. And rather than giving in to the pain or settling for treatments that don't serve her, Kelly has learned to slow down, find joy in the everyday, and redefine success on her terms. Through her 3D rendering business, she helps others bring their dream homes to life, work that not only taps into her creativity, but it also gives her a sense of purpose in the midst of incredibly challenging circumstances. Now, I know Kelly personally, and I can tell you she is the real deal. She's brave, thoughtful, and quietly powerful. And I have absolutely no doubt that you are going to be just as inspired by her as I am. Welcome to the Redefining Midlife, Kelly. It is so lovely to have you here on the show with us today.
Thanks, Jo. Very excited to be here and have a chat with you.
Yeah, it's something out of the normal. And I love the fact that you shared on Instagram in your stories that you're really at this stage of life, you want to push yourself to do something new, something a bit different. So well done. Not everyone
Thank you.
Do that. So I do really appreciate you coming on to share your story today, because I know what you're going to be talking us through is deeply personal, and it's been a hard time in your life. So we really appreciate you being so open and honest with us. And many women live with an autoimmune disease, or they know somebody that does, or they live with chronic pain. So there's going to be a lot of commonalities that people are going to be identifying with your story. So again, thank you so much for being willing to come on to share.
Excellent. Very happy to, and I hope it can help and resonate with some people.
Yeah, everyone wants to feel seen, to feel heard, and also to feel less alone. And I think by sharing our stories openly, that's exactly what we can do. So I love starting to learn about and let our listeners find out about who we're talking to today. And usually I just go back to, what was your early years like? What was life like for young Kelly? Where did you grow up? And, was it a great childhood? Was it a ho-hum childhood, or was it really a fairly tough one? So what was it for you?
Unfortunately, it was the last one. It was an extremely tough childhood. So basically, I'll give a brief overview of what it was like probably up to my teen years. So my parents got divorced when I was about 4 or 5. And being in the 80s and 90s, 2 girls went straight to their mother's care. There was really no chance of a father getting custody of the children. However, my mum suffered quite serious mental illness. She never got diagnosed when we were young, being once again the 80s, the 90s. Mental health wasn't what it is now, wasn't discussed. It wasn't really known a lot about it. So she had a great deal of trouble getting any type of help or diagnosis or anything like that. And it's only now in adulthood and speaking with different people and, learning things about her from other adults at the time that we believe that she had borderline personality disorder, which is essentially a disorder that affects them how they interact with themselves and relationships. And it can be manifest into a lot of different ways, but essentially our mum was very erratic, manipulative, emotionally, difficult to be around, made everything about herself, that type of thing. So we grew up in this is my sister and I've got an older sister, in a very unbalanced childhood.
Mm.
So we used to always say that she was a great mum because we've turned out quite well. Like, we're polite, we're courteous, we don't do anything, bad to people. But looking back now as an adult, I actually realised how bad it actually was. And I think at the time I mightn't have had anything to kind of guide me on what a normal childhood should be and how completely opposite ours was. It was like, when you talk about it to people, some people go, oh my God, that's not normal. That stuff never happened to me. So it was very challenging in that respect. And she would be someone that would, guilt trip you. She would 1 minute love you, next minute act like you didn't exist. And it all depended on what she was thinking and how she was, my understanding is how she was protecting herself, but it just came out in such really difficult ways.
Mm.
Her other thing she would do quite often would be, if attention wasn't on her, she would do anything in her power to get that attention back. So one of the things we certainly remember from childhood and school and things like that, if you ever had an award at school, we would never tell mum about it, because if we did, she would come. And the minute you were getting your award and all the focus was on you, she would come in and have some sort of a fit, fake a heart attack, fall over, hyperventilate, anything to get that attention off me and onto her.
Wow.
And it just became just a horrific experience because you were constantly like trying to keep her just as level as we could be, not to upset her, not to, she never acted out towards us physically, but she certainly had, she had a wicked tongue and could be quite cruel when I look back at it. So already the tears are coming, Jo.
No, that's a lot to deal with. So does that mean that I could have, if that was me, I'd be busting to get out of that home as soon
100%.
Is that what you did as you?
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, when I was around, look, the timeline's a bit grey for me because I'll be honest, I have blocked a lot of that time out. So sometimes my dates mightn't quite correlate. But essentially, she got remarried when I was, I'm going to say 12, 13.
Mm.
And unfortunately, because she was not mentally well, she teamed up with someone else who wasn't mentally well. And then it became a real shit show. Sorry to swear, but it was where things really escalated for me. And I'd gone from coping, but it was a difficult childhood, to quite a terrible time in my life. My sister had moved out of home around that time. She was that little bit older, and obviously she wanted to get out as well. And I, was basically bombarded with two people now just every day. I won't go into too much detail, but essentially it was really emotional abuse of like, you're not worthy, no one loves you, you're stupid, you're ugly, we don't care if you go missing, all these things. It was like a constant daily struggle. And when you're in those formative teenage years, you're already,
yes,
you don't know what's going on, and, you're changing. And then to have, this guy doing this, but also my mum, who really just jumped on the bandwagon with it. I don't know. She never once stood up for me, never once said, no, don't say that. And that was really, really difficult. So essentially I went off the rails a little bit, as you would expect. And I started I look back and go, I was only hurting myself. And that's what was just ridiculous at the time. But essentially I was like, well, if no one cares about me, I'm not going to care about myself. So I would go out to nightclubs. I was around that 15-year-old mark, drank way too much, like blackout drank, terrible. and would hitchhike, would jump in cars with strangers, would go home with guys, would just do anything that it was like a cry for help. If someone pay attention to me, someone please say, hey, you shouldn't be doing these things. And it just didn't happen.
Mm.
And then there's always a part of me though that deep down, I think I knew this shouldn't be my life. This shouldn't be who I'm going to become. And I was extremely thankful to not go down the drug path. And I think that was a really big turning point for me of like, okay, my life could go this way and it would not have ended well. Or I could go this way and kind of go, stuff everyone. I can do something and I can be someone and I can create a good life. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know how I found that. On top of that, so I left home at 16 and it was at a point where I just couldn't handle it anymore. I had to leave school because I had to work. Obviously, I had to pay bills. It was a really, really difficult time. And it's something that I will never forget being that poor. And, you know, getting to a point where I'd buy a loaf of bread to last me the week.
Wow.
You know, I'd also obviously put some money aside for alcohol at that stage. So my priorities were not very good, I must admit. But
Yeah,
I do know what it's I do know what it's like to be really down, like really low. And then I was very, very fortunate to meet Rick. So that is my partner who I am still with. I was getting towards 17 by that stage and actually met him out at a bar. He was a barman. So we should never have met. Like if I had a normal childhood, we never would have met.
Yeah.
And he was just this gorgeous guy who I just was like, oh my God, I was besotted with him. And he thought I was a lot older because obviously I was living a lifestyle that was a lot older. And he came up to me one day and asked me out at my workplace. He just walked by and saw me and asked me out. And as I say, the rest is history.
Oh, wow. So he then became the stabling influence in your life.
Oh, 100%. Once again, if I hadn't found him, who knows where I could have been. I still think I would have had my own personal drive to improve my life, but I don't know if I would have got there. I don't know if I would have had the confidence. But Rick he's an old school guy. He's really stable. He's such a hard worker, amazing provider. But the main thing is I feel extremely safe, crying, and secure with him.
Yeah, well, that's what you want that.
That's what I needed.
All of those really important years for you. So that must, and again, what a testament it is to both you and Rick that you've stayed together through all of that. Yeah, no, that's
it is. Yeah, it's 30 years this year.
Oh, congratulations.
I know.
You've done
and we don't even have a date because we never got engaged, never got married. And I do think that that's from my childhood. I never wanted that type of relationship. I just wanted someone that loves me and unconditionally. And I've got that. So I never took it to those further steps. It wasn't necessary for me. So we can't even remember the date or the month we started going out. So we're sort of like,
it's a celebration. It's a whole festival it's
a whole year of celebration. We know the year, and that's good enough for us.
There's enough doom and gloom. You might as well celebrate those special points. So, Kelly, it's interesting because we come so quickly to conclusions about what a person's life must be like, and I think that's where the unkindness for people people can be very quick to judge and just assume, and that's why I always love to find out about how a woman's earlier years were, because they gave you, as though as hideous a time it was, it also taught you a lot of lessons that many people don't learn, until sometimes it's too late. You learn earlier. So some of those lessons have helped you perhaps to maybe in a roundabout way to how to cope with some other adverse things that are happening in your life. So we'll change tack slightly and we'll think about what life was like before you were diagnosed with your autoimmune disease and all those chronic pain issues that have come up for you. What was life like then for you, living your life pre-diagnosis? And then we'll talk about post-diagnosis and how that all unraveled for you. So, You'd met Rick. Life was in inverted commas, as normal as it can be for any person,
Yeah,
but a lot
exactly.
more stable than what you had when you were much younger. So what other sorts of things, how was life like for you?
Oh, look, I actually think they were some of the best years. Obviously, they were a vast improvement on what I'd experienced. And, we had a really big drive together to create a great life. And we had certain goals that we wanted to achieve. Obviously, we wanted to be successful just in our general jobs and life, but we also wanted to be financially successful too, which was a very important thing for me coming from, nothing. I never wanted to be in a position where I couldn't look after myself if something happened. I always need a backup plan. I always need a plan B. And I always need something just to feel like I can handle anything. And financial is a part of that, obviously emotional and physical and all that, but essentially that was a big part. And Rick and I had a very similar drive. He's an extremely hard worker, and we just set our sights on buying a property. I bought my first house at 21, which is very different in this day and age.
Wow,
It
yeah.
was not that expensive, but coming from where I came from, thinking where I was at 16 to then buying our first house at 21 was like I never thought I would have a home. I'd lived in so many houses.
Mm.
It was just such a crazy thing to think I was a homeowner. And we loved that little house. And it was the best little house. And we still talk about it today, saying, I wish we had the money to keep it. But of course, we sold that and moved on. And we did that quite a few times. So property was kind of our glue that we enjoyed doing together. We found it really exciting. We loved doing the work on the property. Rick's very gifted at landscaping, and he is a jack of all trades. So he did all the hard work, and I was kind of the ideas woman. And we just worked normal jobs, nothing particular. Rick was in one job for 16 years, so he is a stable man. I, on the other hand, am not. I obviously, maybe it's from childhood, maybe it's, undiagnosed ADHD, like we might speak about later on.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but I jump. I jump from so much things. It's very hard for me to commit to something long term other than my relationship, which is quite bizarre. But I never really found my place. I never really found my career. I just got into admin, got into bookkeeping and corporate life, and I kind of was in there.
Gotcha.
And then we had our little girl. So I was 32 when I had her, and we were at a point where we weren't sure if we even wanted children. I had a lot of reservations about having a child because, you hear about people continuing a cycle, and I was so scared of doing that. And but in hindsight, it was the best thing that I could ever do because, get together.
Because you
The
broke the
best thing, I broke the cycle, and we have an amazing daughter, and she's
cycle.
so beautiful and she's so sweet.
Mm.
And I get to give her the things that I never got, the attention, the love, the life, the security, the family unit. And it's been a wonderful thing. I'm so glad we did it.
Yeah.
We did have one and stop there because I kind of know my limits as well. I'm very conscious of how far to push myself, and I did feel one was enough for me.
Mm.
I did have a bit of a bad pregnancy, traumatic birth situation, so that threw in a lot of stuff for me, and I think I had some difficulties after childbirth with mental health and stuff like that. So I know my limits and I know not to push them. So that's why we stopped at one. But we are more than happy with her. We love a family of three. It works so well for us. And then that's pretty much the big main things. Other than that, we just lived our life and enjoyed each other's company and, worked really, really hard to put ourselves in a position now in our 40s, and Rick's now 50. He's actually nearly 54. That we've just created this really wonderful life that I never thought I would have.
Oh, well, that gives everyone a picture of what life was like before. So then
Yes.
let's talk about when symptoms started to show up for you, what they were, and also how long did it take for you to be diagnosed? So just set the scene for when all of a sudden your life changed.
Okay. Yeah. So I was just scooting along life quite happily, and we obviously got through, well, I'll try not to be controversial, but we got into COVID times. And I know a lot of us all suffered through that, whether it had been, with sickness or mental health, jobs, all that type of thing. It was a difficult time for everyone. For us, it didn't really affect us directly. Rick is in trade, so he was able to work, so we didn't lose any work. If anything, it took off because of, the big construction boom and everyone was renovating and doing all this stuff. So that aspect didn't affect us. However, when I got the second, what's it called? Jab? I don't know what it's called anymore.
Yeah.
Vaccine, I had a reaction straight away. My lymph nodes just blew up. And I was like, oh, that doesn't seem good. And I didn't go back to the doctor. This happened a couple of hours after, and I didn't go back to the doctor because I just thought it'll be fine. I am a type of person that reacts quite strongly to medications, not in a good way. I react like in a kind of a bad way. They never really agree with me. So I wasn't overly concerned about it. And then within 2 weeks of that injection, the vaccine, I had such pain in all my body that I could feel it inflamed in every joint. I was really, really tired. Just the most tired you ever felt. Think of, you've got a newborn baby and times that by 10. The physical difficulty I had lifting arms, moving, and all that type of thing. So of course I went to my GP and we started going through everything. And that was, they test me for everything. They obviously thought it was viral, this and that. Now, to give you some background, I do have a family history of rheumatoid arthritis. It was on my mum's side. So my mum's mum, my gran, she had rheumatoid arthritis, and my mum's brother has rheumatoid arthritis. My mum never had it that I'm aware of. And then on my dad's side, his sister developed it later in life as well. And I also have a cousin on that side that got it pretty much the same time as me. We're both the same age. So I'll let you think of that as you will. So, I did mention it and I said, is it this what it could be? And we went through all the tests, and initially there was no markers of it. And I was a bit like, well, something's wrong, And I had a wonderful GP who really just wouldn't say, he didn't say, no, nothing's showing up, you're fine, just get over it. He really wanted to find out what it was. He was very, very inquisitive about it because I showed so many certain signs, but then other things I didn't. And he was very interested to know what this was. So after telling him that I had that, he's like, okay, so long story short, lots more tests, lots more talking. There was words, connective tissue disorder, this, that, all these different things, but nothing was coming back conclusive. So I was really lucky that I got into and I always say this wrong, rheumatologist. I always say rheumatologist.
Okay, so it's not a rheumatologist because
is it a rheumatologist? I'm not sure. I say it wrong, so maybe I'm saying it right.
Somebody who specialises in rheumatoid arthritis.
That's it. That person.
That one.
I got into someone within, so I think I got sick around that August 21, I'm going to say. And then by January 22, I had a tentative diagnosis. And one of the reasons it's been a trouble is because it doesn't show up in my bloods. And there is a condition called seronegative rheumatoid arthritis, which essentially means it's not showing up in your bloods, but everything else points towards it. So I was really lucky that not only did I have a good GP, I also had a good rheumatoid doctor. And she is, young. She understands that everything's not as clear-cut and black and white. I know a lot of other people I know that have, some old school doctors, they don't believe in seronegative rheumatoid arthritis. So it can be really hard to get a diagnosis if it's not really obvious on paper. But we did a lot of tests. We started trialing some medication and I responded to that medication. So that was another thing that gave her the confidence to say, this is what you've got. Yeah.
Can you also describe, a lot of people say I've got arthritis and mistaken just the everyday osteoarthritis with rheumatoid arthritis. That is completely different. So just for the listener who doesn't know the difference between the two.
Yeah, look, it's so funny you say that because that is probably the thing that 90% of people say to me if they see me limping around or something like that. They'll say, you hurt your knee. And I go, oh, no, I've got rheumatoid arthritis. And I go, oh, my gran's got a sore knee or I'm going in for an operation or this. And I like go,
Yeah.
okay, because sometimes it's not worth getting into it. But look, in my personal opinion, it shouldn't be called rheumatoid arthritis. That's the problem with it. It should be called rheumatoid disease or rheumatoid illness or something like that because I think people go straight to, oh, you've got one sore knee. So for me, the difference is basically rheumatoid arthritis happens when your immune system attacks its own body by mistake. It gets confused and it starts attacking the good. I'm not sure exactly what it's called. You'd have to consult someone professional for that. But essentially, it just wears down everything around your joints and inflames it, and it just keeps attacking it. And it's your body is just confused. So it's a very frustrating thing. But for me, my main things are I get joint pain, and it's not like, you twist your ankle or something and that it's a different pain, and it's very obvious that it's a different pain, and it radiates and it goes everywhere. And some people only get it in certain areas. Some people might get it in their hands. Some people might get it in their knees. Unfortunately for me, I have it in just about every joint. So I have it in toes, ball of foot, ankles, knees, hips, hands, wrists, elbows, shoulders, and my jaws. So when I get a flare, it is every centimetre of your body is hurting, and it hurts. Not only that, you get a stiffness with it that can very much come and go. So the pain's pretty constant when you're in a flare before you get, it under control.
Mm-hmm.
But the stiffness can come and go, and that's the bit that can get very confusing for people of like, you're limping an hour ago and now you're not. And it's something that I really struggle to get my head around mentally because I think, am I making this up? Like, how can I go from one extreme to the other? So for me, it's
yourself then, are you? You're questioning I said you're almost gaslighting yourself that you're questioning yourself.
100%. And given my history with my mother, I automatically go to, I'm going crazy. This is it. It's happening. So I have this added level of absolute fear that I'm making this up. And I just happen to be seronegative. And I just happen to, I don't swell as well. A lot of people swell and they get really red, and I've got none of that. So I'm like, visually, sorry, you can't, I look totally fine.
Yeah.
And then I just can't move. Like to get out of bed some mornings it took every ounce of my being to get out of bed. And then I would put on a good face for my daughter and I'd make her a lunch and I'd be like, yep. And then it would take like 10 minutes to get into the car. And it was a really difficult time to come to terms with how I could go from being, I'm not super active. I'm not like a, iron lady, and I don't go to the gym, but I've always been reasonably physically fit. And to go from that to really not even being able, you couldn't bend down. I couldn't put my shoes on. I couldn't get dressed because my hands wouldn't work. It was a really, really trying time.
Oh, my goodness. So then how did they start to work out, well, the treatment plans? Because I know, and because I know you, and I've been following you, not only personally, but I also follow your story. So I know when you were going to be trying new things and having more tests done or more MRIs, going through that process. Can you talk us through, it's not just one treatment, you've got to find what's right for you, which is the frustrating part.
Yeah, and that was something that I wasn't aware of, is that it really isn't a one solution fits all. You break your leg, you get a cast put on, it gets better, you're done. You have a headache, you have a Panadol, you go have a rest, and you're sort of done. With this, it is so individual to each person that one drug just there's not a blanket fix.
Yeah.
So I started off on the really light stuff, and that's when they still weren't 100% sure what I had. So I probably tried 4 medications, all in tablet form. Some didn't do anything. Like, I found no difference. I did get a remission, which is what they call when you don't have any symptoms. I did get a remission. for about 3 months. And I was like, this is after my second drug. And I was like, we got it. Yes. Awesome. It didn't last. It only lasted a few weeks. And then I went on to the next one, and that made me quite sick. So I couldn't stay on that one. Another one gave me like heart palpitations, and I felt like I was dying. It was horrible. So I went straight off that one. So it took a really long time. And it was only then that I started understanding that, oh, this isn't, I'm not sick for a year on this. I could potentially be like this for the rest of my life. And that was very difficult. So you essentially just keep trying them. There's a lot of drugs out there, which I'm thankful for. I am thankful that there's so many medications. And while I think of it, will mention that, look, obviously there's lifestyle changes you can make. You can, exercise, movement, eating well, avoiding certain foods. Certain foods trigger certain people.
Mm-hmm.
I've done all the diets. I've done, gluten-free, which was also happiness-free for me. That was such a tough one. I didn't like that one at all. I've tried dairy-free. I went alcohol-free for over 6 months, which for me, a cocktail girl, was really difficult. Made no difference. Made absolutely no difference. So it's a matter of just trial and error of all these things. And eventually we got to a point where it sort of would plateau, then it'd get worse, and then I'd sort of plateau on that level, and then I'd get worse. So it kept spiking, and she said, we've got to get this under control. Because if it keeps spiking, it basically wears all your joints, and you can end up, in a wheelchair with all new, having to have replacement parts, all that sort of stuff. So we really need to get it under control. But also the pain factor was getting unbearable for me. So then she finally said, you've failed enough of these drugs. We can now put you on biologic drugs, which are the next level. They're immune suppressants. They're pretty heavy hitting. They have much better results, but they also can have quite bad side effects. And you have to be approved through the government because it's on the PBS, because they're obviously very expensive. And once you get to this level, you're approved and you can go on them. So that was sort of the stage I've been in this year.
Gotcha. And so far, fingers crossed.
So, yeah, well, the first one I was on for, last year, what year is it? Last year I was on the first one for 9 months, and we saw definitely it was leveling out. And then for the last 3 months, I could feel the increment of the pain and the stiffness, and we knew that's not working. And that was an injection. And I really didn't like that one. That one was tough.
Yeah.
I had to get Rick to inject me. It hurt. I developed a bit of a phobia about getting it done. It was only fortnightly, but it was enough to kind of, that anxiety started rising every time I knew it was coming. So that I was glad to get off. And now I'm on a tablet form, and I've been on it for 7 weeks. And the first 6 weeks has been absolutely amazing. I've been totally normal. I've been bending down. I've been lifting things. I've got a whole new lease on life. But sadly, the last few days, it's coming. Hopefully it's just a blimp in the road, and it'll come back, and I'll feel better again.
Yeah.
But it's this underlying fear and the mental anguish of these sort of diseases. Yeah.
Oh, I can't imagine how that must be for you. So do you contact your doctor early on when you start to notice things aren't like they were, before? Is that what
Look, it's a bit tricky. It depends on your doctor. This one we have to trial for 3 months. It's like the minimum of trialing it. So I'm not there yet. So basically what I do is I have a diary, and I keep track of everything so that I can say it started here, and then it had, got better or got worse, or this happened. So at this stage I've got till mid-June. Gotcha. So I'm just going to have to see what happens. I really hope it was just a moment. I may have even just been getting a bit ill because I am on immune suppressants. I've been fortunate to never be sick. I don't get the normal stuff. I don't get the colds and coughs. I get like the weird diseases that no one wants. So I've just
hell.
Sorry?
I said I can imagine that roller coaster that you must be on.
It is. I think that's been the hardest out of all of it, is that, and it plays back into childhood of not knowing what's happening and not knowing what I'm supposed to do or how I'm supposed to react. And I do find that it's the same sort of ride of like, I don't know how I'm waking up tomorrow. Am I going to wake up good? Am I going to wake up in pain? Am I going to wake up? Like how? I think that is what probably people with these sort of illnesses struggle with the most.
Yes.
And getting people to understand that it can change really quickly. I'm talking really quickly. I could be sitting here now, I'm quite fine. I could go make tea tonight and I'm just like, oh, I can't stand on my feet. They hurt so much. So it's just so bizarre how it changes so quickly.
Yes. And we're talking prior, what we kind of touched on a little bit, but prior to hitting record, we talked about like with so many of these illnesses, people look fine from the outside, or people dealing with chronic pain. You look okay. So when to the outsider, you're going, well, what's really wrong with him? What's going on? There's something else happening. So because it's not presenting itself physically, it presents itself in other ways, the pain. So how do you deal with what you just described so beautifully and the roller coaster? How do you deal with, the ups and downs with that? What sort of things have you found being really helpful for you that might help somebody else?
Look, it's really tricky to answer. A lot of it is and it sounds so cliche, but you have to stay positive. It's almost impossible to do it at days. There's been days where I've just like lost it and just gone, this sucks. I hate it all. I don't want to do this. But I have to make sure those moments are really small and I get it out, get the emotion out, feel it, but then don't dwell on it because ultimately you've still got to create the best life that you can. And I have fought way too hard to just fall in a heap now and go, oh, I'll just sit here and I'll never move again. I think being super positive, the best you can be, realizing you'll have bad days, but then the next day you can have a good day. It can happen. Finding things that you enjoy doing that you're still able to do, that's a tricky one because some people love physical things. So if you're a runner, there's a lot of people I speak to on a group page that we're on. And a lot of people have said they used to be really athletic and do all this stuff and now they can't and they really struggle. But I always suggest find something else that you can do that you enjoy. For me, it's creative stuff. I love being creative. I love going on social media and talking to the people I've befriended there. And it's just been a really good outlet for me on those days where you can't get off the couch or you really just are struggling. You just get some interaction and some way of doing it.
Yeah.
And another thing is don't always take on board the advice you get from strangers and random people. Obviously, from professionals, listen to it. But also question that too. Don't just take a doctor's word for gospel because if I had got a doctor that just said you're not showing any signs, I don't know where I would be right now. I wouldn't have started any treatment. I'd be over 3 years in, I'm in now. And I think if I hadn't have pushed that sort of aspect of it, who knows what would happen. So be an advocate for yourself and ask the questions, but also don't take in every piece of advice. Don't Dr. Google everything.
Yes.
Because it gets really overwhelming really fast.
Yeah.
And you get conflicting information. And this disease and many other chronic illnesses aren't the same for every single person. The thing that strangers love to say to me, and I'm going to put it out here to say, please don't say this to chronic ill people. The thing people love saying to me when they first meet me, and maybe I've lived and sometimes I just say I've got rheumatoid arthritis. First thing they'll say is, oh, have you tried turmeric and celery juice? And I'll just go, like, I'm 3 years in. Of course I've tried those things. Like, I have an illness. I'm not an idiot. And it's those type of conversations can bring you down sometimes because you are sick of having them. And I understand people's good intent, but ultimately don't give advice if you don't have the disease, you're not a doctor or someone that's got it. Please do.
And that's valuable advice on your part to others, just to check in and make sure what you be mindful of what you're saying. And that's so right.
Offer support, but not necessarily medical advice.
I like the way you were almost framing it that don't become your disease. Don't become that's not who you are. That's part of, that's just one small jigsaw puzzle, although it can be overwhelming and overtake so many aspects of your life. But the way that you're explaining on how you cope is that you're trying to do other things to fill your cup So you're not just focusing on I'm Kelly, I have rheumatoid arthritis, and that's who I am. You're finding other parts to explore in your identity, which I suppose is really important for anybody when they're going through an adverse time, whether it be with a chronic illness, chronic pain, or or anything else, is to try to focus that that's not the only part. That's not just who you are. You are far more than that. You are multidimensional, not just that one thing.
Oh, 100%. I think that is so, so important. And I think that affects where your mental capacity is.
Yeah.
As I said, you will have times where it's too much. It's just too much. And you'll break down and you'll get sad. But it's just so important not to get caught up in that. And, don't lead conversations with, oh, I've got this or I've got that. Or instead lead conversations with, oh, I did this today. Or we went to, this great restaurant. It was so fun, blah, blah, blah. So I really focus on those good, fun things. And I think that's gotten me through some really difficult times.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also about support. So finding the right people to support you is so important as well. And I mean that in a medical sense, but also in your friends and family. I don't have a big circle of friends. I'm actually quite a homebody, and Rick and I are quite content just being us. So we don't do a lot with other people, but the people that I have got in my life, are really good. They always ask how I am, or they say, we'd like to do this. Do you think you'd be up for it? That type of thing. And they understand if I say, no, I can't do that today. I'm sorry. And there's no, rolling of eyes or anything like that. And just finding things that we enjoy doing together and with is our daughter is really important. And our favourite thing is to go out on a Friday afternoon and we have a couple of cocktails. As I said, I did try alcohol-free. It didn't work, so I'm back on it. Some people you might have to go alcohol-free, but for me, it's something that we literally can sit there for a couple of hours, chitter-chatting about our week, what's happening, what we want to achieve, what we want to do, planning a holiday. It's like planning the future, because I do have a future, and will sometimes it be difficult? Yes. And will sometimes, I can't go trekking Europe? No, probably can't do that.
How could it look for you?
But I can do other things that will fulfill me in those same ways, will still mean I'm part of this family, that I'm still enjoying each other's company. I haven't isolated myself and things like that. So I think if you can get some really good people around you that encourage you to just keep going and adapt, but don't change who you are necessarily as a person.
Yeah, that's really valuable advice. And I also like the way you also brought in earlier when you were talking about being with a support group as well, because for myself, I can empathize with how it must be for you. Your friends, your family, those who are close to you can empathize with you, but that's not their lived experience. Also, having, I suppose, a support group that you could go to in those times where you need to talk to somebody else who really gets it because they've lived it, it can be helpful. So you seem to have a great mix of all of that together to help you through, the highs and lows of having the rheumatoid arthritis.
It is good to have a mix, and you do want people that experience it and that haven't experienced it, because then you get both sides. I think just a word of warning, be very careful going into actual, full support groups. I do find on, like on a Facebook forum or something like that, I do find it does spread a fair bit of negativity. And it's very easy to get caught up in that, and everyone talking about their ailments and everyone talking about this didn't work, that didn't work. So as much as it's good to bounce some things off people, I think you've got to have that mix of positive people around you as well. And it just stops getting in that sort of wallowing stage of like, oh yeah, this does suck, everything sucks, I can't go on type of thing.
Yeah. And in spite of everything that's happening to you, especially when you've got a flare up, life goes on. When you've got a family, how do you cope with that? And many of our listeners will be in the stage of life where they've got careers, families, and dealing on top of an issue of chronic pain or a chronic symptoms from a disease. What do you do?
Yeah, look, it's so tough to answer because obviously everyone is so different. I am aware of how fortunate I am that I've got this at the age that I got it at. If I got it in my 20s, we would have had a very different lifestyle, because it would have affected my work, it would have affected our plans, and it would have affected everything. However, at this age, we've sort of created and worked super hard for this. This has not come easy, but we put ourselves in a position that we are in a comfortable living position. We don't have job stress, financial stress, that type of thing. So for me, it's definitely been easier than some other people. And a lot of it, unfortunately for me, is I mask things very well, which is from childhood. So probably the way I get through it is I will mask a bit of it. And I also make a bit of fun of it as well. I'm quite sarcastic and I've got a bit of dark humor, which gets me through some bad times. So
Yeah.
those sort of things help me. But, we've got one child, which makes life so much easier. If you're a young mum with RA and you've got 3 kids all under 10 or something, that is going to be tough. You are going to go through some really tough times. And I think that's where you just need to know this isn't forever. You will get, some reprieve at some point, whether it be through medication or just your body will hopefully adapt and things like that. So there's not a one solution for all. But I suppose the thing to just let people be aware that don't have chronic illnesses is this can happen to anyone. So I always like to sort of say to people, have a bit of a plan in your life. Is what if something happens? Like, don't dread things, but just maybe have a bit of a plan. If this was to happen, how would we survive? How would we cope? Can we put a few things in place that might allow that? There's things like insurances, that type of things. There's a critical illness insurance that I actually have that can help you through these times and that type of thing. So, yeah, I think it's a good thing for everyone to think about of how these type of illnesses could affect you or a family member if it happened to you.
Yeah. And Kelly, the impacts of your illness does have a ripple effect on your family and your friendship group. So what's been that impact?
I think for Rick and I, it's been tricky because he's a supportive guy and he always asks how I am and he, that type of thing. But I know for him, I feel he felt some loss. Like there was a bit of a mourning period of like him thinking, Jesus, is this how our next 40 years are going to be? And I feel that put a bit of pressure on us at the start. We've worked through it. We've spoken about it. I think really open communication is really important. And I tell him when I'm feeling like, oh, I feel like I'm not the same person and this, and we sort of go through that and have discussions about it. And for Izzy, she's handled it really well because I do keep it quite light around her. And we do have quite a few running jokes about, how if there was a zombie apocalypse, I'd be dead already because I can't run. So it seems it's dark humor again, but we've just found these ways to not treat it like, she just goes, oh, that's mum, it's cool. Like she's not stressed by it. But it has affected, even a few holidays we've taken, it's affected because I can't go exploring and I can't, climb a mountain and I can't do that. So we've had to adjust as a family in certain ways. But really it's about communication. And I think having a partner that understands that, you're not bringing this upon yourself, that this is just an unfortunate thing that happened, and that's willing to go through the ride with you and help you when you're down. But remember that your partner can also get down as well. It's not all about you.
Yeah.
So it's also about me asking him, how are you feeling about this? And, I know I've changed, but I'm trying really hard to do this or do that and that type of thing. So it's just finding that balance of, getting through it essentially, which is ultimately what life is. Life is really about getting through it. I'm learning. It's just continual.
Yeah. And talking about that, so on top of your autoimmune disease, you're also going through perimenopause and not to mention your teenage daughter going through puberty at the same time. So that's another layer of complexity on top of everything. How's that working for you?
Oh, man. And we're both Scorpios. Look, perimenopause snuck up on me, hey, and I got it quite early. I started showing signs at like 42, I'm going to say, and it's quite common when you have autoimmune potential issues. So everything kind of fell into place with all of that. So I've been in the throes of it, especially for the last 2-3 years. It's been just horrible, but I've been really fortunate that it doesn't affect my mood. So great about that. But I've had like the night sweats, massive anxiety. Oh my God. So I obviously lived through anxiety as a child. That's 100%, but I didn't feel it, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Whereas as an adult, I felt it. I honestly felt like I was dying. The pressure in my chest, I just couldn't cope. So I was like, okay, not only have I got body pain, I'm on all these drugs. I got to, do this, do that. Now I've got this on top of it. And it's been really tricky to navigate. But I've done a few things which have helped. For the anxiety, I wanted to address that because I knew that was also tied into my history, childhood, how I view myself, all
Yeah.
those type of things. So that I went and saw a therapist for that, which I highly recommend. It's taken me 40 long years to actually go to someone because I felt it was a weakness, and I realize now that it's not a weakness. It's actually very empowering to understand why you are the way you are and the things you've gone through and how they've shaped you and how to manage them. So I got some really great tools to do that, which has helped with my anxiety. And I haven't experienced that for probably 2 months, 3 months
Oh,
now, which
that's
has been
great.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I have gone down the hormone replacement therapy, but it doesn't really work for me. And I do feel I'm on a lot of medication. So I
Mm.
tend to not want to go on more medication.
Yeah.
So that sort of, I've been lucky with the mood. I don't really swing. I often ask Rick all the time of, have I been acting crazy? And he goes, no, you seem fine. So I kind of use him as my gauge. Whereas with Izzy and me, with her going through puberty and me going through not only perimenopause, but also just the pain aspect, I do have a pretty short fuse.
Mm-hmm.
So we do get a little bit, but I always make a really big effort to go and talk to her about it if we ever have a little bit of a fight, and talk about it and also explain why I was feeling this way and how she should feel. Her feelings are valid, all that type of thing, because I'm very conscious of not, I don't want to repeat history in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So I always try to work through those things. But I think we're getting to a better balance now. She'll be 15 this year. So we're
Mm-hmm.
kind of getting there.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've given lots of advice earlier on the things that have helped you. And is there anything that any other words of advice that you might give to another woman who might be going through the lows of living with a chronic illness or an autoimmune disease?
Oh, look, the first thing would be find good doctors and specialists, and they can be hard, but I do think if you're not gelling with your doctor, I do think it's important to find people that understand you and that you can ask any question to, and they'll find out for you or get back to you and that type of thing. So, a really good actual medical support team is important, and ask lots of questions. As I've said before, you can go on Google, but don't go crazy on Google and research. I do think there's such conflicting information. You end up getting super confused. And a lot with these conditions, all the symptoms can vary so much. You could have 100 different chronic illnesses. So maybe let the professionals diagnose that one for you. And join some groups, but don't get super involved type of thing. Just use it as a sounding board, ask some questions, answer some people's questions, and try and keep it really positive is important. And movement and exercise. I started Pilates. I've never exercised. I've never gone to a gym, never done anything. And I started Pilates about, say, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. Best thing I've ever done. I have a fantastic instructor who assesses how I am that day, and we do exercise based on my ability that day. And it's been really empowering to be able to build strength, but not be like, I can't do this. We just adjust. And that's probably the other piece of advice is adjust.
Yes.
Figure out how you can get through this, because you can. You just need to figure out like how you're going to do it by remaining positive, finding outlet, find people to talk to, and find a creative way to enjoy your life still.
Mm. That's very empowering advice. And so going through what you've gone through these last few years taught you about yourself?
Ooh.
Mm.
I've always thought that I was quite strong and resilient. I think that's something that I do accept of myself. But I probably didn't realize how much I keep to myself. So as I've gotten through, and I think through midlife, you start learning that you are who you are, and that's okay. And you don't need to hide, and you don't need to, pretend anything. And I think in the last few years, with this condition and being challenged, I'm sort of become more me, and I've become more of someone who just is pretty honest with stuff, and I am what I am, and that's okay, and I'm okay, and I've got a fabulous life, and I think I need to appreciate it, which I do.
Mm.
Yeah.
So that
So
comes down, is that more of an acceptance of who you are innately and being comfortable with that?
yeah, I think it's an acceptance of me, and that I'm okay. Like
Yeah.
I am I am loved. I am lovable. I'm not this thing that I was told for all those years. I am, yeah, I think it is a self-acceptance, and it's okay to be who I am. It's fine.
Damn right it is. Well, look, when I see you talking about various things in your stories, and you're so open on there, which is surprising because you're so open there, and you're worried about coming on and talking and telling your story in this format. You seem somebody who is self-assured, who's honest and open, vulnerable when you need to be, and you call out the bullshit. So that's which is great. It's a wonderful mix, and I think that's probably part of this stage of life as well, that all of these things are coming together.
Yeah, I think definitely the call out the bullshit part is I think it's very
Did I
poignant
nail
for
that one?
women
Did
in their
I?
women in their late 40s. We're all just like, we've just had enough of it. We're just, okay, thank you. We've done enough. So now
Yeah.
we're just going to start living our own lives. And it's an
Mm.
amazing time to be, as difficult as it can be. And as much as you struggle finding yourself and figuring out what you're supposed to do next, is that there is empowerment in it. There is an amazement in it. And women are amazing. We are so much stronger than we think we are.
Yeah.
We can really handle anything. We look after our families. We very rarely look after ourselves, but we still just keep going. And I think that that's an amazing trait that women have, and that it really shows up at this age group where you've lived your life a bit, you kind of know who you are, you know what you like, you know what you don't like, you know what you'll tolerate and what you won't tolerate. And I think that's a really important lesson for women, to figure out their boundaries and to stick to them. And
Yeah.
it's a hard process, but once you
It
get there,
is. It's
it's
a
pretty good.
whole, it is. It's a whole messy middle because you're becoming somebody who is entirely different. You're losing a lot of different identities. And you've got to decide, well, who do I want to be going forward? Particularly, when I'm looking forward to the next half of my life, who am I going to be? I'm going to be a very different person. Who you were in your 30s is very different to who you are in your 40s as to who you are in your 50s. So it's a lot of self-exploration. And sometimes you've just got that time and space that you can give to yourself to think a bit more deeply on these things where you haven't had it when you were busy in your 20s and well, you probably weren't interested in your 20s, in your 30s and your 40s, because they are busy years.
Yeah, I think especially women with young kids don't understand that this stage is coming,
Oh,
and they
you
might not be
don't. It
prepared
takes
for
you.
it, because I wasn't
Yeah,
prepared
I
for
know.
it. Yeah, and it's good that we're all starting to talk about it now. And I
It
think
is.
it's important to talk about it so that this isn't like a big slap in the face when these
Mm,
30-year-olds get to our age. We've sort of pioneering because it was never spoken about.
no,
Did you ever hear about this from well, I certainly didn't from my mother, but from other
no.
from other parents? It was never spoken about. And I like now that it's spoken about, that it's okay. And it's okay to be all over the place a bit and not know what you're doing. But the
Mm,
point is to try and figure it out. And I think once you don't have the stage of little kids where they need you for everything, and that was a really difficult time for me, of not having that, she didn't need me. And I really struggled with that, because I felt like, no, I'm supposed to be helping you at all times. I must be there.
mm.
And to sort of step back has been very interesting. And it's given a lot of time for reflection and a lot of time to go, not just for me, but also Rick and me going, well, what's
Who
our
are we
plans
going
for
to
the
be?
next
That's
10
right.
years?
You're
Yeah.
exploring different relationships, aren't you? And so for
Yeah.
many, it's the final cutting of the cord when they leave home. That's hard.
Yeah.
And forging what those new relationships are going to look like in the next, when they're in their late teens, early 20s and burgeoning on from there. Yeah, it's a whole new normal that you've got to create. And you've got that ability to design it the way you want to. I think.
Yeah, 100%. And there'll be hurdles like anything. And it
Yeah.
could be your health hurdles, it could be financial hurdles, it could be relationship hurdles. But ultimately, I think the goal for everyone should be just live your best life, because when you get sick, you realize how quickly it can change, and it can change like that.
In a heartbeat, yeah.
And I'm fortunate that, yes, it affects me, but I've got a long life ahead of me. It's not a terminal illness. It's not, it's still going to be okay. I've just got to figure out how to navigate it. And I think that, yeah, you just got to realize that you only live once, and you've got to live your authentic best life.
Yep.
And you'll go through hard times, but guess what? There's some bloody good times too.
Mm-hmm.
There's some amazing times.
Yeah. There's
and
always
if you
that
focus on
rainbow
those,
in the cloud.
there is. You've got all the sayings, Jo.
Oh, I do. That just
You said a lot more eloquently than me.
roll off my tongue, they do. So what are you looking forward to then? Because you were talking about, you've got all these things in the future that you'd like to do. What are some of the big ones in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh God. Well, for us at the moment, we were getting into property for a while. We were doing some house flipping, and we did one, but I got sick during the middle of it, and we kind of realized I couldn't cope with the physical work that was involved. So we've sort of put a pin in that. So now we're buying a couple of like long-term investments, and that's where our focus is. So I handle all the kind of admin stuff and all that type of thing. And, Rick's towards retirement. He's 54 this year. He works a very, very physical job, and he works super duper hard. So we're trying to figure out, well, how do we transition him out of that into something else? So we're kind of toying with a lot of different ideas. It's going to be tricky, but we'll see what happens. And then I've got my creative side, which I've got my Instagram page, which I love, which is just dribble. It really is.
It's
I just love.
not. You've got some great stuff on there, and we'll have all of your handles in the show notes for people to look you up and follow.
So I'd like to continue with that, because I really enjoy that. It gives me, when you work from home by yourself, I do our business stuff, and it's kind of like I like to be able to interact with other people. And also when I feel sick, it's something I don't have to get dressed and go out and do. I can just do it online. But I'm also going into 3D renders and design, and, I love that so much. I wish I had discovered that in my 20s and 30s, because I think that would have been a perfect career for me. Didn't work out that way. I found it now. So I'm trying to find ways to still be creative, still work in some capacity, because I like to be kept busy and, go down that kind of path. But, old AI is making that a little bit interesting. But anyway.
So could you use something like that for consulting? Is that how you would love to see that? Or what are your dreams there?
No, it's very tricky, because as much as I come across, I think, as quite open and brave, I am not. So I find the one-on-one with people, so consultancy, it makes me scared. I like to be in the background. I like to be sort of just, I don't know. That's why it's really hard. So I'm still at the stage of I don't know what I'm doing. So it's okay if you don't know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
We're just exploring different things and doing different things. But in some way it will involve design, property, renovation, something like that, because that is where Rick and I's passions are.
Yeah, great. And follow those passions. You'll find you will find your answer there. And finally, Kelly, our wrap-up question is, what do you hope 80-year-old Kelly is going to say about current day Kelly?
Oh, that's a good one. I think she would say good on her for just being her, because I honestly don't think from now till then that I will ever shrink myself or not trust myself. I think from now on, I'm just going to keep on going, and I'll be who I am, and people either love me or they'll hate me. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So I think just keep she probably just say she kept going, because I'm 80 now, so I must have kept going.
Damn right, you just keep on going like that Duracell battery. A little bunny keeps on going. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for sharing your incredible story with everyone today. You've given us some pearls of wisdom, lots to think about. And you were very open and vulnerable with sharing of your story. So I really do appreciate that. And thank you, because I know your story is going to help other women.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. And I hope it does. And obviously, I just wish everyone who goes through something just to know that they're stronger than what they think they are. And you can get through it. And there's definitely going to be amazing times ahead for you, for sure.
Yeah. Great way to end the show. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you feel inspired to make the next chapter of your life the best one yet. And remember to share this episode with someone else who would love it, and connect with me on Instagram or LinkedIn at Jo Clark Coaching. All the links and the details from today's episode are in the show notes or at joclarkcoaching.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe this show on your favourite podcast app and leave a 5-star rating and review. This helps more midlife women find these empowering conversations. I can't wait to chat with you next week. Until then, take care and keep creating a life that you love.